Can you all hear me? Can you hear? Please put a one if you can hear me. Oh, I can hear you. Okay, they hear me now. They hear me. So we're gonna be good. Put a one in the chat if you can hear me, please. Awesome. Thank you. Yes. All right. I'm gonna thank you for hanging in there. Please hit the share button. We've had so many technical difficulties, but God is good. He's allowing this to work. We believe that this is going to be a great session. While we've had so many challenges and difficulties, thank y'all. Thank you for hanging in there. It's Friday, Friday prayer chat. It's March 28th, Women's History Month. We're celebrating 5 years and doing the prayer and chat. Thank y'all so much for hanging in there. Do me a favor, hit the share button. Thank you for all of the ones. Thank you for your patience. I just want to introduce this wonderful young lady that's coming on. We're already well into the chat, but we're going to take our time tonight. It's going to be amazing. Miss LENORA Holmes. She is in the house. She's an associate clinical social worker, government project officer, public health administrator. She's also a veteran. And she is also my classmate, high school classmate. I'm going to bring her on. I need for y'all to go crazy in the chat. I need for you all to put fire in the chat. I need for you to hit the share button. It's going to be amazing. Please welcome Miss LENORA Holmes tonight. I'm so excited to have you on with us. Can you hear me good, Miss?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Little bit of an echo,
Okay.
but I'm so glad we finally got this connected. Thank you all so much. Um, it's going to be an amazing night. We are here because God has called us together. Called us together over, I don't want to say how many years. look, it's, look, it's almost 40 years. Oh my God.
Excited to be able to say it, right?
Yes, we are truly blessed to be able to connect in such a wonderful way, doing ministry. We're in alignment still. God has kept us, even though we are miles apart, He's kept us together in the spirit. We stay connected on social media, continuously encouraging one another, following one another. And so I'm so grateful that you are here tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I am so glad to. Clearly, I always say if there is something going on and if there's distraction and interference, it must mean that we have something that we need to share and say.
Yes, yes. I am in total agreement with you. The enemy will try to stop the plan of God, the purpose of God, but he is not successful in any means, and never can he ever stop the plan of God from coming into fruition. There's always the Bible speaks of about the ram and the bush, and always a way out and a way for us to bear up under it. He's always giving us victory. Thanks be to God that causes us to triumph. So come in, everyone. I'm so excited. So let's start. Let the audience know some things about you, some of your past, some of your journey, your history, because it's so amazing. Even yesterday when we were talking, you were sharing with me some things that I didn't even realize. Your phenomenal background. Just share with the audience. Let them know your great journey and where you've come. How you got to this point.
Let's see. Well, my journey has been a long one, but God has been faithful through it all. I can't take any credit for all the things that He's blessed me to have. I can just walk in grace and thanksgiving and saying that it's because of Him that I have and accomplished so many things that I've done thus far.
Yes.
Can y'all still? Is it a background?
And there is some background. I
All
thought we
right. Well,
were
we're just gonna keep pushing.
okay. Yes.
So one of the things that I wanted to share about is really just my story and how I got to the place that I am at this particular time in my life. 13 years ago, my husband passed away, and he was a pastor, and we pastored a church, and we have been in ministry for about 15 years within the Detroit and here in Dallas, which is where I reside. I'm trying to.
I know, right? Because your testimony is so amazing.
The enemy just don't want to let me be great, but we're gonna be great
15
today.
years you all pastored.
Yes,
Wow.
so we were in ministry. I'm trying to see if I can, because I got so much feedback on this end. Hold on.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. And it seemed like we were able to, now it's muted.
Can you hear me
I
now?
can hear you now.
All right, let's try it again. So for 15 years, we were in ministry, and we did ministry together. We had a pretty thriving ministry that we were a part of in Detroit. Then we left Detroit and moved to Dallas to start our ministry here. In that process of starting ministry, my husband was diagnosed with cancer.
Wow.
And so that was about 2 years after being here. And so initially he was misdiagnosed with something called sarcoidosis. And so he was being treated for that for a year. And then it was discovered that he had cancer.
Wow.
Um, so that was, of course, very disheartening. It was very sad. We were trying to figure out, like, why, what was going on, how could this be happening to us, and all of those things.
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Can you hear me still?
Now I can hear you on the computer. What
All
did
right.
you do?
I'm gonna
Oh
tell
my
you,
God.
I don't know what I did, but listen, God got it. All right, let's get to it because
Let's
all
hang
that
this
feedback.
phone, these phones up.
Don't hang it up because I got it on
Okay,
mute. We
okay,
just
yeah,
gonna
we'll
keep
keep
it,
it going.
but we gonna keep going. So I'm glad you can hear me now.
I can
So
hear you now.
I know without all the feedback. Okay. So he was diagnosed with cancer, and
Yes.
then once we figured out what that was, he was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And at that point, he had been given a very short time to live. They had said 3 to 6 months, get everything in order. And we were devastated because when you serve God, you have ministry, you doing all these things. It's like, how can this actually happen? Right. And so, God was faithful. He lived far, longer than the 6 months. He actually lived 18 months later. And so, but during that time, we did all the things that we knew to do. We had been living a life for God. We have been, raising our children. We have been sowing into the kingdom. We had done revivals and, tent ministries. I mean, you name it. We fed the homeless, all the things that, let me, and I'm doing this in parentheses, all the good Christian things to do, right?
Mhm.
And then not only that, but we stood on the word, right? So that was most important. When he first got the diagnosis, all good Christians and those of us who read the Bible and study the Bible, we stood on 1 Peter 2:24. By his stripes we are healed. Isaiah 53:4 and 5. He took our pain and our suffering and our transgressions, and so because he bore those things, we didn't have to. And even James 5:14 and 15, calling the elders of the church, calling the people of God, let them pray, let them anoint him with oil, and they would pray, and then he would be restored. So we stood on all those things, right? And so what happened was it just didn't work out the way that we thought, and ultimately he passed away. And I have to tell you that I was angry. I was devastated. I was hurt. I was unsure. I felt so incredibly unstable, right? In all that was going on. And one of the things that I want to say is that when we're talking about grief, Grief will help you understand where you are with your walk with God, right? Because it is so easy to say, oh, I trust God. Oh, I believe him. Oh, he's a good father. Oh, he's a provider. Oh, he's a cover. Oh, he's this. And, we can praise God. We can sing the songs. We can quote the scriptures. But one thing for certain is grief will let you know where your faith really is in God, right? And so I believe God. I trusted God all the way down to the day that when my husband passed away. I wouldn't even let them take him away because I was, talking to God like, this is a good time for you to show up. You know,
Right.
this is a good time. Let me lay on my husband, like, and breathe into him, like all these things that we read about. And it was like, God, I trust you. And so then I went on to remind God of all the things that I had done. Because then, all of a sudden we start talking about, we'll remind God, I was a good wife, I sold my time. We sold into the kingdom. We prayed for people. We casted out devils and demons. We honored our vows. We raised our children in the way that they should go. My husband was a pastor, for heaven's sake. It was like, what else? And one of the things was God just didn't heal on this side. He didn't. And so what do, when those things happen and you're walking in faith and you're believing and you're doing all that you know to do to walk upright, to walk justly before God, and you're doing, the best that you can to live this wholesome example of who God is. And so after he passed away, it was really very difficult for me. I went into a stage of depression. I didn't want to be bothered with people. I kind of locked myself away. My hygiene failed. The only thing that kind of kept me afloat was that I had four children. One of my oldest sons was away in the war at that time during when he passed away. So that was devastating because we didn't know where he was. We just knew that he was out there in Afghanistan somewhere fighting this war. Um, my And then I had three children. My oldest son was in college. The first one was away in war. My oldest son was away at college. He was at Oral Roberts University. And then my other two were in high school. And I was like, what kind of God is this? Like,
Right.
so all of a sudden you start challenging God, like, I thought you was a father. I thought you was a husband. Why would you
Mm-hmm.
do something like this and cause me to be in this space where of crises and uncertainty? He certainly didn't feel very real to me. He certainly didn't feel very present, right, for me. And so I was just very angry with him. And so I was grieving something fierce. And I just I started to reason. And what I mean by reasoning, I was trying to figure out things and make sense, of what God had done and why he had done those things. And so reasoning really is, it's just thinking over a situation and an issue and in an attempt to try to understand, all the intricate details, right? As if we could really understand why God allows the things
Right.
that he allows to happen in our lives. And the truth be told, that even if God would have told me his why, I still would have been asking why. Why?
Mm-hmm.
Why did you do this? Nothing he would have said, right, would have been enough because,
Yeah.
you love people, and those who you
Yeah.
love, you like, listen, I got questions. I need some answers, and people always say you shouldn't question God. My answer was like, why shouldn't I? Because he created everything. And so who else is
Right.
going to have those answers except God, right?
Right.
And so I was just in this space and in this place. And sometimes that there are just when we're in our natural being, right, in our flesh, we'll never understand those things that are spiritual in God, right? We just not gonna understand those things that are spiritual. And the truth be told, when my husband died, I remember asking God, like, why? Like, why would you do this? Like, why would you, take him away? And so I began to just kind of sit, like I said, in my depression, which caused anxiety, which caused a lot of anger. I was not at all this spiritual woman, that I had looked like and had portrayed and that I was at that time. I just wasn't, my lifestyle didn't really represent that person who I quote unquote used to be, right? And so
Mhm.
so much was just tied into of who I was. And when you live, I like to say this good life, this well kept life, the
Right.
biblical life, it was like, I was living how people say I'm living my best life. I was, we had, at the time I was in my early 40s.
Mhm.
Financially, we were good, our children were good. We had the house that we wanted to live in. We were traveling. We had the cars. We had quote unquote, the titles, all of those things that, really define to us and to our other people, us being blessed or us being successful. We had education, we had all this stuff that the world says, you should be happy. And to be honest, I was. Now, everything wasn't perfect. My marriage wasn't always perfect, but we
Mhm.
were living, living a good life, so to speak. And so then when all of this just kind of took place, it was just like, oh my God, now I'm walking in grief. I'm walking in anger. And we all know those 5 steps of grief. It's anger, it's denial, it's bargaining, it's depression, and then in acceptance. But in no particular order. So one day you could
Mhm.
be grieving, the next day you can say, I'm accepting this, and I trust you, God. And then the next minute it could be, I'm so angry. Then the next minute I'm depressed all over again. So it's just this rotating cycle that just kind of went on and on and on. And the grief is really defined as just deep sorrow when we have experienced some form of a loss, whether, and it's usually associated with the loss of a loved one.
Mhm.
But sometimes it could be associated with the loss of a job, a loss of a business or income, all those major things that can cause major life altering things to happen to us. And
Mhm.
so there I was, and there I sat, the pastor's wife, who was supposed to
Wow.
be this phenomenal example. And, I was the one who had my hands up and, praising God
Right.
on Sundays and all of
Right.
that. And so now I wasn't even trying to go to church because I wasn't feeling God at all. It was like,
Mhm.
mm-mm, I'm not feeling you. I don't want to go to church, because I
Mhm.
didn't feel like I could go and still, honor God, because I didn't like his choice and I didn't like his
Mhm.
decision and I didn't agree with it, right? And so it was a hard journey, because sometimes we can get stuck in this darkness, this
Mhm.
dark hole, and you get very comfortable in this state of depression, right? You can get just it becomes comfortable. Ain't nobody bothering you. I'm alone with my thoughts, and we shouldn't isolate ourselves, because that's really where the enemy would have us to be, to isolate ourselves, right? Where we
Mhm.
are by ourselves. And so he can just torture us and, remind us of all those things that we shouldn't have done, or, you should have did this, you should have did that, right?
Right.
Um, and so I began to grieve. And then as I was sitting here thinking about, what were some of the things that were some of the most pressing things that I grieved and that I just felt so distraught with.
Mhm.
I grieved the life that we had created, right, with my children. Um, I grieved the fact that my children no longer had a father. And that we were now what I was, this broken family, and that
Mhm.
we really were kind of like what statistics has said, even though we weren't. But those were the things that were playing in my mind. I grieved
Wow.
the lifestyle, the title, the safety, the support, the covering. If you're
Mhm.
married, you know what it feels like to have a spouse that covers you. If you've lost a child, you grieve the title of being a mom to somebody who no longer is there to call you mom, right? If you're grieving the loss of a job or a loss of income, those are things that you work very hard to have. So grief comes in so many different shapes, forms, and facets, and I was grieving all of that, right? I grieved the intimacy, of having a spouse. Those are things that people don't often talk about and you don't even think about. And so, because my husband had been sick and I had been a caretaker for about 2 years prior to
Mhm.
his death, I even grieved the fact that I was just alone. Felt very much alone, felt very much uncertain, felt insecure, about my decisions. I also grieve the future that will never happen. All these dreams, and when you're married, or even if you have children, you talk about all these plans. This is what we're gonna do when the kids get grown, or this is what we're gonna do when my daughter or my son gets to be this age, and I can't wait till they graduate, and I can't wait till the kids get married, and I can't wait till they all out of my house, right? And I can't
Right.
wait to be an empty nester. And so you if you have a spouse, you made all these plans, and there's things that you talk about, and a future that you have prepared for yourself. And if you're a parent who's lost a child, those are those things that you talk about, where when my child graduates, when they graduate high school or college, or when they get married, when they have children, all those things. So I grieve both the loss of a husband and the loss of a father for my children.
Mhm.
I grieve the things that were never going to happen again. We were never going to celebrate Christmas together as a family. We were never going to celebrate birthdays again as a family. We were never going to celebrate these monumental moments of when my children got married, or when they had kids, when they graduated, high school. Two of my kids, their dad wasn't present. He had already passed away right before they graduated high
Mhm.
school. My oldest son didn't get the opportunity to for his dad to see him when he graduated college. Now
Mhm.
all of my kids are adults now, and so but they've all been, they're married and have had children. And so when my oldest son got married, I remember I just had a full-fledged breakdown, because I remember us talking about those moments, and albeit it had been some 10 years later after he had passed away, I still grieve that process. Like, man, I remember when we talked about, when Brandon was gonna get married. My son is also a pastor now, and so I grieve those moments when I get to go and listen to him, and he looks just like his dad, right? And he picked up this same mantle, and he possesses some of those gifts and those talents and that mantle, right? And so now I look at him, and sometimes it brings back these memories of things that, man, oh my God, he looked just like his dad. Oh my God, he sounds just like his dad, right? So I grieve those things. I grieve the goals that we would never achieve together that we set out. I grieve like I said, the celebration of my children's accomplishments. And then I also grieve the fact that I was now a single parent, and I had to raise these children, which by the way, they were teenagers. Now anybody who has kids, right, that was just a hot mess, because they were
Yes.
teenagers. They were, I think my daughter was 10th grade, and my son was a senior, and then my other son was a freshman or a sophomore in college. They were all athletes, and so I was grieving that I was one parent trying to be at all these different sporting events and moving them from point A to point B. All of
Mhm.
those things that I grieve, and none of those things, they always say, there's scripture in the Bible, find scripture. I was not interested in looking for scripture. I was not interested in hearing about scripture. I was
Mhm.
just mad at God, right? And I
Mhm.
said, how am I going to begin to heal this?
Yeah.
How? How do you heal? And so first, some of the first things that I had to do, I had to learn how to walk in forgiveness. And that sometimes could be exceptionally challenged. And I'm going to say this at the risk of it sounding weird, but if you've ever been in that space, I had to forgive God. Now, I know
Mhm.
that sounds crazy, but I really had to forgive him, because he made a decision, or allowed a decision, that I did not agree with. And so I was challenging that. Like, you don't know what's best for me. You don't know what's best for my children. You don't know what's best for our family. Like, what kind of God are you, that you would allow this to happen? And so I found myself attacking God. But even during my attacks, he was still all right. He knew that I was going to be angry. He knew that I was going to be upset. He knew all of the feelings, all of the emotions, all of those things that I was feeling inside. And despite it all, he still loved me unconditionally and still accepted me, even when I wasn't accepting him. And so I had to begin to trust God despite being angry at God. And that was a hard one to do. I had to finally get to a place where I decided that I was going to go back to church, right?
Mhm.
And so walking in forgiveness. And one of the things I realized, like, I couldn't move forward, and even in the things that God had for me, if I was still stuck in my past, if I was still stuck in my anger, if I was still stuck, in my trauma. You can't move forward if you were walking in unforgiveness, or if you remain, you choosing to be stuck. And so one of the things is, we choose sometimes to be stuck for a variety of reasons, because it's comfortable.
Mhm.
You like, listen, I could come back to my house that we shared together, and everything in that home looked just like he was there, like he had never left, right?
Wow.
Clothes still hanging up in the closet, pictures of my family. It was like this safe haven, and it was my reality. It wasn't even real, though. It wasn't my reality
Mhm.
anymore. However, going back to that place brought about a sense of comfort, because it was one of those things like, well, did it really happen? Is this
Right.
just like a bad dream that's
Right.
happening? That did not that this didn't happen, and am I going to wake up from something that's just going to allow me to say, okay, it was just a bad dream, and now back to business as usual, back to my life as usual.
Mhm.
And that never happened. And so I had to began to unpack that, right? I had to get rid of the clothes. I had to pack that stuff up. I had to take down the pictures off the walls. There were certain things that I had to start to remove out of my life if I ever wanted to, go forward, as opposed to staying in this place. And I'm not saying that you should just, remove all aspects of a person, when they transition, or even if, divorce is also a form of grief too, when you're leaving that previous lifestyle. But there are some steps that I think that, we need to take in order to move forward, so that we can really walk into the fullness and into the purpose of which God you know, um, has in mind for us. Like,
Mhm.
despite all the hurt and despite all the pain, God still had a plan for my life. He still had a plan for my children's life. He still has a plan for anybody else's life who's on this call, who may be going through this, who may have experienced some form of a loss, who may have experienced the death of a loved one, who may be going through a divorce, who may have lost a child or a grandparent or whomever. And during my time when my husband passed away, so my husband died in August, my grandmother died in December, and my aunt died in January. So it was
Wow.
back to back to back to back to back. And it seemed like it was very cruel and unusual punishment.
Wow.
But I had to get to this place where I had to identify those things that I was really upset about. Like, I had to heal from being jealous. And let me explain what I mean by that. I was jealous of friends who still had husbands,
Mhm.
because you grieving loss of relationships. We had couples that we hung out with. We had
Wow.
couples that we traveled with, we were raising our
Mhm.
kids with, and all of a sudden you're not a couple no more, right?
Right. Don't
So
fit
it's
in
like,
anymore.
I'm feeling a little salty, I'm feeling some kind of way, right, that this person still has a husband. And then it's the awkwardness, right, because your friends don't know what to say, because they miss him too, and they don't want to make you feel awkward. But everybody booed up, and now it's Valentine's Day, the first Valentine's Day. And my
Yeah.
husband was a huge gift giver, and so I can remember, like, ain't nobody sending me flowers today. I
Right.
don't have cards. I don't have all these things. So I had to learn how to let go and not be jealous of people who still had spouses, of people who still had their grandmother, of people who still had their aunts, and all these things that I had felt that I had lost. And so I had to learn how to release jealousy, right? Of other married couples, of other people who were doing ministry together, of other people who had their churches and had their congregations. I had to learn how to let all of that go. And then, the things from my children again, the daddy daughter dance. Well, who was going to take my daughter now? I
Right.
remember my daughter was nominated to the homecoming queen court, and I was just in this angst, like, who is going to take her? She doesn't have a dad, she does.
Mhm.
And of course, we had her uncles stepped in,
Mhm.
and we had friends of the family. In fact, I don't know, we probably had about 5 people that was willing to walk with her, but her uncles flew in and escorted her. but I still was grieving that because all these other people had their fathers and I wanted that, for her.
Mhm.
And so
Mhm.
for me, what I had to learn, and I have a spiritual mom. Her name is Louise Trice. I just love her to death. And
Mhm.
she, one of the things that she's when my husband was getting ready to transition, I remember we were talking about it. And I knew that that time was coming, but I was just interceding. I didn't want to talk, death. I didn't want to accept death. But I think in my heart of hearts, I knew that that time was coming.
Mhm.
And because God is good like that, He'll let you know, even though
Yeah.
we may not want to hear. He will let us know. And I was like, nope, not la 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 la. I'm not hearing that.
Yeah.
That's the enemy. And I remember a phone call that we had, and she was just so loving and so gentle, and she was so sweet, and she said, you got to let him go. You have to let him go. And I remember just feeling like just this sucker punch. And she said, you know holding on to him is really an act of selfishness. It's
Mhm.
selfishness. If you will let him go, then he can go and be at peace with God. And I was like, I knew what she was saying was true. And she said, if you let him go, um it's really like us letting, how Jesus laid his life down for us. It's just an act of selflessness, right?
Yeah.
I had to release him back to the Father. And what I came to this point in my life where I had to say, and this was the analogy that God had given to me. He said, you have your children. You would be really upset if somebody told you how to raise your children. So,
Mhm.
that's like me coming to you, Brenda. You need to
Yeah.
raise your kids. You need to be doing this and you need to be doing
Right.
that. And so really what I had to come to the conclusion was is that my husband, whose name was Reggie was God's child. And
Yeah.
it really wasn't my business to be telling God what he was supposed to be doing with his children, right? Because
Yeah.
only he can understand his reasonings for allowing it to happen. Only he understood the timing and when it was going to happen. And although it was a surprise for me, it was not a shock to him, right? He had already knew that before the foundations of the earth when his time was going to come to an end. And so I had to get to this place of acceptance, even though I didn't really want to get to that place of acceptance. Um, and really, what that meant was that I had to surrender to that season that I was in. And it also meant that I had to agree with God. And I was like,
Mhm.
that was a very hard space to get to, that I had to learn how to, we said in the therapy world, you got to learn how to sit in it. And I didn't want to sit in it because it was
Mhm.
messy, it was hurtful. I was angry. I didn't want to give myself permission to feel because I didn't want to feel any of those things.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to acknowledge that I needed God because at this point I was mad at him and I was trying to say, I don't really need you. I don't need to do all of this, when I did need God, because who else was going to help me, navigate through all of that. And so I had to submit to the season in my life of discomfort and submit to the season of my life when I said, God, I don't agree with you, but I trust that you know what's best for me and that you still have a plan, for my life.
Love.
And if God, and it was once I could submit to that portion, then I could start to hear from God again, right? I could start hearing the things that he was saying to me. And one of the things that he said, I don't just want to heal the painful parts, of your
Mhm.
life, but I want to also heal those painful memories of your life, because
Mhm.
there was some pain associated with thinking about the memories. And, we get often bombarded with all these memories, which will take us back to that space of, depression,
Mhm.
anxiety, fear, all those things which are of the enemy, right? And what God is really saying that, I want to resurrect that. I want to resurrect those feelings. And so I want to give you faith when you have, exchanged your despair for faith and for hope and for joy, and give you courage again. And I want to build this relationship. Like I want to walk through this thing with you. Like I didn't leave you out here in this space,
Mhm.
to deal with this by yourself. I didn't leave you, although sometimes we feel like we are alone because God doesn't respond in the ways that we want him to respond. Um, he was like, I'm here. I'm present. I'm grieving too. Like, I'm sad with you. I feel this, these things with you. And so
Yes.
as I began to sit in that space, I had to say, okay, Lord, if we lack wisdom in any area, you said that if we ask you, that you would give it to us liberally. I don't know how to heal. I don't.
Yes.
And I don't even really know if I want to heal, because my truth is, I want my husband back. I want my
Yes.
family back. I want my lifestyle back. I want my name back. I want all of these things that was so wonderful and so good back. And I feel inadequate without having any of those things. And in reality, what that makes me feel like is that I'm a failure, right?
Yes.
That nothing good is ever going to come my way, that nothing good is ever going to happen for me. And I feel like you forgot about me. Like, somewhere along this path, I did something to make you angry, or I did
Mhm.
something to make you feel like you were disappointed in me. And oftentimes we see God however we see our natural father, right? And so
Yes.
if we
We
have
talked
this
about that.
relationship with
Yes.
our fathers or not,
Mhm.
right? So if our father wasn't present, or if he was present but they were only a provider, then we start doing all these things to gather this attention. And when we can't do it, we become overachievers, overthinkers, and we excelling in this, all to gauge some form of acknowledgement from God. And God is like, you ain't gotta do none of that. I'm here.
Right.
I am here. And
Yes.
so it just took me some time to get to those spaces. And so some of those things that I did to heal, I really invested in therapy. I believe we
Mhm.
pray. And not only do we pray, but we go seek therapy, because that is people that God has, ordained to walk us through those journeys. Me being a clinical therapist, I've walked people through their traumas, and I've walked people through their grief, and I've walked people through their hurt. And sometimes when you're going through those journeys with people, you can be the hope, you can be the light. And I know sometimes we often say, well, God, why did you allow this to happen to me? And he like, why not you? Why not you? Right? Because he has put something in me at this particular time. And again, this is one of those statements that will probably sound very weird, but I would not be the person that I am today had my husband still been alive. That sounds really sad, right? Because
Wow.
I loved him and I loved the life that I had with him. But I was not really Lenora at that time. I was Reggie's wife. I was a first
Mhm.
lady. I was Brandon, Ryan, and Taylor's mom. I had all these titles, but I didn't know who I was. And we as women, we do that, right? We get behind our kids, we get behind our men, we get behind businesses and ideas, and we lose our own identity. And so God has the wonderful opportunity, and I yielded to allowing him to rebuild me into knowing who Lenore is, right? That I'm wonderfully made in his image, that he still loves me, that he still has a plan for me and it's still good, that he still has an expected end for me. And although, I am a widow, that's not the title that I carry, right?
Mhm.
It's just a portion of my life that I have had to experience. But now, when as I'm on the other side of this, I look back and I think, who else is equipped to do this, to talk to other people
Wow.
about this other than me? Who
Yes.
else can I stand up and say, and talk to other widows and other people who have lost specific things, or lost people and lost jobs and lost incomes and titles and all those things that we work so hard. Who else is qualified but me? And
Wow.
while now I can look at it and say, wow, God, you trusted me, enough
Mhm.
to let me walk through this hurt, to let me walk through this loss, to allow me to walk through this pain, and now to be on the other side to tell other people, you can do it too. Like, God has
Yes.
not forgotten about you. Like, there is hope, there is still joy, there is still, you still have a life and you still can live despite all of those things. And so, back to how I healed, it was counseling. I had, I invested heavily in counseling, not right away, because, like most mamas, I wanted to make sure my kids were good first. And, we really do need to follow those things that they tell you on the airport. Breathe first, put the air mask
Yes.
over your face. Well, that wasn't me. I'm guilty of that. I put it on everybody else and I was almost dying, trying to breathe. But I want, because I wanted to make sure that they were breathing right. But I invested
Wow.
heavily in counseling at that time. And I'm still in counseling and I'm still in therapy. It's been 13 years and I still see a therapist and I still see counseling, and I still have those moments, where I struggle with specific things. The other thing is that I had to find who my community or who my tribe of people
Yes.
were. And so my tribe of people who I could be myself. I didn't have to be Lenore. I didn't have to be
Yes.
pastor. I didn't have to be first lady. I could just be authentically me. So if I wanted to cry, if I wanted to sit in silence, if I wanted to talk, if I wanted to cuss, yep, I said it. If I wanted to laugh, if I wanted to pray or if I needed somebody to pray for me, I had a tribe of people who I could be that. And they were my safe space to allow me to heal, that God surrounded me with so that I could actually heal. And then the last thing that I did was really learning you have to. Zig Ziglar has this one of my favorite sayings. It says, the best way to heal is to help someone else to heal. And
Wow.
so during that time after he died, I ended up going on a missions trip to Africa and working with children who had experienced trauma and women who had lost their husbands in these tribal wars. And so I thought I was going over there to help them. And I got healed in the process because, I thought my story was sad and it was
Mm-hmm.
bad. And then I got over there and I was listening to these stories of these babies who was telling me, they was killing people in these tribal wars to get, wear clothes and to eat and all this. And I was like, you know what? My story, listen, I'm gonna just be quiet. I'm not even sharing my story because it didn't, in comparison, it seemed very, I felt very like, you should not talk about that because you talking about stuff and things, and these are people who are fighting for their life. They didn't have they've lost parents, they've lost husbands, they were infected with HIV, and I mean, like, they had real life stories. And although my life story was very challenging for me, there's always somebody else who has a story that's more challenging than yours. And so your story is not the only story, right? It just happens to be your story. And so I guess the thing that I would probably end with is that one of the things that I would want to share with people is to remind you is that God is always here. He is always present. He is always present. He was there when your loved one passed away, when you were going through the divorce, when your child was taken away from you unexpectedly or died from some, uncurable disease. He was with me when my husband was dying. He was with my children, when they were upset and walking in despair. And despite the hurt, that and all the hurt and all the anger and all of the disparity, he goes with us and he doesn't forsake us. He is always there, always there. He renews our strength. He really does. I am a living testimony that, he renewed my strength every single day. When I was angry, he renewed my strength. When I didn't want my strength to be renewed, he renewed my strength. um and he was just, my refuge, and he always was present. And so once I began to heal and stop being angry with him and began to just be able to sit in my discomfort and walk into this spirit in this space of acceptance, then he just started to open up doors, and he started to show me how he was my husband when I didn't have a husband, how he was a father to my children when they didn't have a father, and how every step of the way he has made provision for me, from my career to, from being a therapist, from being working as a public health administrator and a government project officer, from managing millions of dollars, like all these things that he has put into my hands. And not necessarily because I was always so educated or so knowledgeable. He even blessed me to finish my education and, to get a master's and to, work on my doctorate and all those things. Like, I am a living witness that life goes on, right? And life is still good despite. Now, does that mean that I don't miss my husband? No, it doesn't. But does it mean that my life is still good? It absolutely is still good. And so now at this stage in my grief walk, some 13 years later, I can look back and say, wow, God is still good. He's still good, y'all. He is still good. And despite it hurting right now, and even if it's, especially if it's still very tender and it's still very new, I can just tell you, stay with God. because he will heal and he will redeem and he will give back. And I don't, although I don't have the answers to the why, my husband passed away, and I may not ever, I'm content with the fact that he still has a plan for me, and the plan that he has for me is still good. And it's still good for anybody else that's going through that too. So that's my story.
I love
Um, that's all I
this
got. That's
person.
that's just my truth. So thank you for the opportunity to share it.
Yes.
Um,
I'm so blessed by you, so inspired. And we still have a few minutes. I don't want to let you go. I'm so blessed that even you mentioned your son is pastoring now. And
mhm.
so he took on that mantle, and he is standing strong in the pastoralship. And that's amazing that he didn't get discouraged because of your strength, because of you staying with God, because of you not giving up, you seeking the help that you desired and needed. Your family was able to stay together and move forward. You have grandchildren. Your family is so beautiful. It's
Thank
so
you.
amazing to see you all thriving the way you are. I am just so grateful for your strength, your testimony, for your endurance, and for you willing to share and being authentic and real. That's what I love about you is you're authentic. You're not putting on a show. You're not just saying things because it sounds good, but you're really living this and walking this out.
I think it's so true. I think, my kids, they all have their struggles. And, while life is good, I didn't get exempt from raising teenagers. They still got on my nerves. And it was hard.
I
It
never
was
saw that.
hard. It was so hard, and there would be times when I would just be crying like, God, this cannot be my life. Like, what is happening here? There were times where I was very lonely, and desiring to have a spouse and desiring to have a mate. There were times where I made, some very poor choices in my decision making and some of the things. There were times where I felt tremendously. There were times where I mismanaged money. There were times where the lights got cut off. There were times when
Wow.
all of these things. Like, I wasn't exempt. I wasn't exempt.
Yes.
And it doesn't mean that just because those things still happen, life still was life in for me, right?
Yes.
But just because those things happen, it still does not negate the fact that God is still good. He
Yes.
is. And he was still with me with all that. My son, yes, he's this phenomenal pastor now. But
Love it.
I can listen. That's a whole other segment about how he got to that place. And I'm so grateful because when I look at him and I know some of the struggles that he has had and the things that my daughter has endured and my other son has endured, I mean, life still happened. We wrestled with I wrestled with all the same things. Like, I didn't get a pass because I was a widow. My kids were still cutting up. I still was grateful from, my best friend, her name is Sherelle. And I would be like, Sherelle, and I mean, the moments and the times that I had to call her and I was like, girl, like
Wow.
these kids, your nieces and nephews, I'm gonna need you to get them, like, for real, for real. And what was I gonna do? I had to go. I went back to college because I had been off from work for 6 years. I was involved in ministry and raising children. And so I hadn't worked in 6 or 7 years. And then when my husband died, I was like, how do I reinvent myself? Because my life was evolved around pastoring and raising children and, living this life. And so I had to go back to school with in my big old age in my 40s to go back and get a master's to try to figure out, like, how do I become, because all of the techniques and things that I had learned as being a clinical therapist, it was outdated. They had new
Yes.
stuff that was going on. I couldn't talk the language. I was intimidated. I was scared. And, trying to trust God for jobs, starting at the lower end of the totem pole because, my
Mhm.
experience where I
Mhm.
had this lived experience, I didn't have the, academics behind me. I didn't have, the financial backing or support behind me. And I had 3 kids in college at the same time, and I was trying to go to college. So
One
listen, I
another.
needed to rely on God heavily. So I don't want to paint this picture like, oh, your testimony is so awesome. Listen, I was living. It was rough in them streets.
Yes. But look how God has brought you through and brought you through successfully. And it just as you're speaking, I can just see God holding your hand through it all and holding our hand through it all. And like you stated, we don't get a pass. It doesn't exempt us from experiencing things that everyone else is going through. But the difference is that God is holding our hand through it,
Mm-hmm.
ensuring us victory on the other side. And as we were speaking about Ruth and Naomi, how this story is so much similar in the Bible, and it's so encouraging how Naomi lost her husband.
Mm-hmm.
They moved from, just like you moved from, home. They moved trying to get away from poverty and difficult situations, and then her husband was transitioned. Then her sons transitioned,
Mm-hmm.
and she was left with her daughter-in-laws, and one left. Ruth stayed. Um,
Right.
but God's hand was with them through it all, and you can just imagine, like just listening to you, just brought that story even more to life, and it just opened my heart up even the more, understanding where people are and how challenging life can be. However, we have to stick together. We have to provide community. We have to
Yeah.
communicate. We need to have those crucial conversations, as you stated, had to sit in it. And
Yeah.
and a lot of times we want the pain to be eliminated, but we have to sit in it and allow God to help us to work through it. Um,
Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's the pain, that it's the pain that pushes you to this purpose, right?
yes,
Because either you have an option. You can choose to sit in it and do nothing, right? The
mhm,
choice is really yours. You
yes,
can choose to sit in depression. You can choose to
mhm,
sit in these, spaces of poverty. You can choose to sit in these spaces of dead spaces. There was a
mhm,
part of me that died when my husband died, and I think the thing is that, we're looking for this healing, for this pain to go away. Well, let me
right,
just be very clear. It's been 13 years where I am living my life and I have moved on. There is still a hole there that can only be filled by him, that will never be filled.
mhm,
And I also want to tell people, you have to forgive yourself, because 2 days before my husband died, we got in the worst argument. And I
no
said,
way,
stuff. Yes, way. Why he was in the hospital? Because I was tired. You say stuff and you do
yeah,
things, and because you're exhausted, and you frustrated, and you want it
yeah,
to end. And
yeah,
so I had to, I didn't get a chance to really apologize, to say, hey, I'm
mhm,
sorry that I said that. So then I had this guilt. Well, maybe if I would have said, because that's what the enemy will do. Well, you
yeah,
weren't a good wife, you weren't a good mom, you weren't this, or you said this, or you left and you did all these things, and he wants to just remind you. And I'm here to tell you that all of that is a lie. You still were
that's
a good
good,
mom, you were still a
that's
good
good,
wife, you were still a good
mhm,
husband, whoever it is, whatever the situation is. You might have made some poor choices or poor decisions, and you lost the job, you lost the business, whatever. But that's just human. We're
you're not
human beings
perfect,
that's living in a very
yeah,
human society, so we respond. Sometimes we say
mhm,
things that we don't often mean, out of our hurt, out of our distress. And so
mhm,
you have to forgive yourself too. Do not, and I will say it as loud as I can, do not allow the enemy to use guilt, to guilt you into feeling because you didn't say something or because you didn't do something. Again, it goes back to that, you know over and over again. I'm trying to, figure out what I did wrong. I'm trying to
right,
figure out if I should have done something different, and I'm reasoning. Stop
yes,
reasoning. Stop
stop it, yes,
it.
stop
Stop
it,
reasoning
yes.
and just
And we have
live.
to, yes, and we have to give it to God, because I've had traumatic experiences, lost people that were very close. In high school, I had a very
Yeah.
traumatic situation, and you're right. The guilt will try to creep up on you, but you can't allow that, because it's not real. It's
Right.
something that we're making up, and the other person isn't even here to answer to it. So
Right.
don't bring questions that you're not going to get answers to from the other person. Give them to God and let God handle it. Let Him take it. The Bible states that His burden is easy, His yoke is light.
Yeah.
Release
Yes.
those into His yoke, and I've learned that to because and that's one of the things that I hear a lot when people have suffered loss. They feel bad about things that they've said, they've done, um, actions that have come about. But it's just something all that the enemy is trying to bring about that's not reality. We have to give it to the turn it over into the spirit and the bosom of God. We got to just give it to Him, let Him hold it, and we have to move
Absolutely.
forward and in the purpose that God has for us, the plan that He has for us. And we have to move because others are depending on us. Our
Mm-hmm.
families are depending, our children, those that have suffered the same type of situations, they need us. We have to become strong for them now. Um,
Absolutely.
and we can do it.
We can.
Amazing.
I currently lead a grief group with women.
Yes.
And so, when I think about, my some of the conversations that I have with them, it's only things that I can say because it's been my experience. Nobody else can
Yeah.
say those things. But
Right.
sometimes I have to tell them like, get yourself together. Stop it.
Right.
Get up, and oftentimes, the biggest part of it is doing those things that you miss your husband doing. Like,
Uh-huh.
one of my friends, the hot water heater broke, and
Yeah. Yeah.
flooding in the house. Another one had
Yes.
her car broke down, and I was like, listen, we have a whole
Come on.
community here. We're about to get together and we're gonna figure out who we need to call, who we know,
Yes.
that can make this happen. I'm sorry I'm not your husband, but I'm gonna be him today, and we about to figure
Right.
this out,
I
because I know
love
somebody,
it.
you know somebody. And so you have to remind them, and I have to often remind myself. I get the privilege of being able to speak into their lives, and they speak into my life too.
I love
And I
it.
get to talk to them about those real life things that really do happen, right? And the things that we struggle with. I often say the widow is the person that's often forgotten about the most. The Bible says
Mm,
that we should take care of widows and orphans. We
exactly.
do a
You're the
fabulous
fatherless.
job with talking about taking care of orphans, but we don't do a good job with taking
No,
care of
you're
widows,
so
because we
right.
often think that widows are these old ladies, that they 80 years old or 70 years old, and they at the, on the last end of their life. Well, what about the
Yes.
40-year-old widow like me,
Yep.
right? I didn't
Yep.
have people there that could support me. I didn't have anybody there to talk me through, who had gone through that experience. Fortunately, I did find a support group that was called Young Widows that was really
Mhm.
helpful for me during that time, because I was like,
Mhm.
God, you got me in these streets by myself. Like, I know it's got to be somebody. And so
Yeah.
now I'm that somebody, that I can call and
Wow.
talk to people. And it brings me joy, to be able to talk to them and to encourage them. And it's not just women. I have some men that I talk to as well that have lost their wives, that are, raising their children, and they have questions like, okay, my daughter about to go to prom. Like, what I listen, you got to go get her dressed. You got to find
Right.
somebody to do her hair.
Right.
So all of those
Come
things,
on.
and now it just brings me joy to be able to give back to
Yeah.
those individuals who were at those places that I was at, that I didn't have anybody there, but now God saw
Mm.
fit. He had those people in mind, right, when I was going through my stuff, because He knew at some place in time I was going to get it together, and then now I can give back. And not only can I give back to them, but they get to give back to me, and now they're preparing to give back to somebody else. So it's this repeating cycle. And so if you don't get up, then who people are depending on you. You got
Yeah.
to heal, because who else gonna do it? It's your assignment, right?
Wow.
So
It's our
um
assignment.
I
Yes.
just walk in that. I do. Like, okay, God, you chose me for this. This was not the lot that I chose for myself, but this is what you chose for me. And so, you say that all things work together for good for those of us who love Him and who are called according to His purpose. It's working for my good. It didn't look like the picture. I had to grieve the life that I thought I was going to have, and I had to give that up and say, okay, this is no longer the life that I thought. I gotta let that go, and now let me see. And so now I live in expectancy. Like,
Mhm.
what's my life going? What's gonna happen next?
I
Like,
know
what's my
that's
next husband gonna look like?
right. Yes.
What's my
What
next house
good is
gonna look like?
coming?
What's my
Yes.
next, form of ministry that I can do? What's my next
Come
of
on.
being able to give back to
What's
people?
my
So
next?
now I can live in expectation instead of living in despair and looking back like, oh my God, this is what happened. I do
That's
at times
good.
will look back, but not to look back to stay, but to go back to revisit. And it's encouraging because now I can say, oh, look at where God has brought me. Look, 2 years ago I would have behaved this way. Now I'm laughing, I'm joking. I'm here talking to you about my story. 5 years ago, I would have never been able to do this without breaking down, crying, the whole nine. And now look. So this is
God.
a God. This is God. It is not Lenore, but I'm thankful that He has entrusted it into me to be able to say, to be able to encourage, to be able to tell people that there is hope. You do have an expected end. You do. And just live in expectation. See what the Lord gonna do, because He done already brought you this far, and He's
Yes.
not going to leave you. So let's see what the end gonna be. I want to see, because it's gotta be good, because I lost a whole lot.
Mhm.
So if you gonna restore it, I want it all in this
Come
lifetime,
on.
right?
Speak on. Come on. Yes. I love that. What's my next? I
Right.
love it. And to expect greatness. And I've been preaching expecting the big and
Right.
not small, expecting the big. As you stated, we're deserving. We've come this far. God has not left us. He's not going to fail us. And we're expecting the big, moving forward and
Absolutely.
not going
Absolutely.
backwards. I love it. Absolutely love it. Yes. What's my next?
Right.
Come on. Yes, I love it. And you have really encouraged me to really, we speak this all the time, but sometimes we're guilty of not doing it, checking in on people, seeing where they are. And, we may not always have the right words to say. And sometimes we shy away from people that may be, going through because we don't want to offend someone or we don't want to say the right thing. And I always pray every day almost, give me the right words to say, a word fitly spoken. It's like apples of gold and settings of silver, is Proverbs 25. And we just have to ask God to help us to be there for people, to show up for people. And even if we don't have the right words to say, we don't know what to do, just ask them, what can I do?
Hmm.
How can I help you right now? I don't know the right thing to say. I may not have the perfect words, but I'm here and I'm sticking with you through this. And I
Right.
think that we would just show up for people,
Yeah.
even though in those ways that it'll help individuals come through faster and better. Just showing up for people, calling,
Hmm.
checking on them, just showing up. Send them someone roses. They're used to getting them. Check in on them to make sure things is going well at home and with the children. See if they need a coat, coats this winter. We really have to do better, as you stated, checking in on one another, not assuming, showing up for people.
I say this: don't put the responsibility on the person that's grieving. This is my biggest
Wow,
pet
I
peeve.
love that.
This is what we say. And y'all,
Come
listen,
on.
y'all don't even have to, don't put no emojis in there. Don't say that's me. But we always say, if there's something that you need, call and let me know. Do you really think I
I
am dealing
love
with
it.
grief? I'm dealing with loss. I'm not
Come
about to
on.
call you. I'm not
Right.
about to stop asking people. Stop saying that, because that makes you feel good. What you can do, and I tell people this all the time, if there's somebody that God has laid on your heart, just say, hey, I'm going to bring you dinner today. I'm going to send
Right.
an Uber Eats over to your
Come
house.
on.
I'm sending a gift
Send you
card.
groceries.
I'm just
Yes,
calling to check in on you. Like, stop saying, if you need anything, well, I'm here for you if you need
girl.
anything. I'm not calling you. I
Right.
didn't call you when everything was good. What makes you think I'm going to
Exactly.
call you when it's
So
bad?
you're not
Stop
right.
saying that to people. Stop
It,
it.
yes,
I will
and
tell a
that's
funny story about that.
yes.
We had a one of my girlfriends, when my husband died, we just got so tired of people saying, if you need anything, let us
Oh my
know.
gosh.
And
The
so
funerals, that's the
we started
main thing
saying
they
stuff
say.
like, if you need anything, let us know. And we would say, well, as a matter of fact, we do. And so my girlfriend, I said, I need $100 grocery card. I need elephant ear plant, and I need a pie. And so she got off the phone. Listen, she came over my house with this elephant ear, this gift card, and this pie. And she said, I will never. And we just busted out laughing because it was a
Right,
joke. She said, you have taught me never to say that ever again. She said, because when I got off the phone, she said, I told my mom what I did say if you need anything. And she did tell
right,
me what she needed. So just don't ask people what they need. Just say what you want to do. Now, if I have the luxury and the liberty to say if you need anything and somebody say, yeah, I need you to pay my mortgage. Okay, then if you're in a position to do that, then you say that.
right,
But if you're not, then say, hey, I want to bring you dinner. Hey, is it okay if I come and pick the kids up? Is it okay if, I send an Uber Eats? Or if you don't even want to ask them, do it secretly. Just mail a card, to them.
right,
Stick some money in there, the old grandma handshake. Put some money in their hand,
right,
if God
exactly.
lay on your heart to pay a bill. There's so many things that we can do without placing the burden on the person who is in grief.
Right.
Stop doing
Make
that.
the
That is
burden
just
off.
exhausting. Don't put
Yes.
the burden on the person. Whatever God has burdened your heart to do for them, then do that for them.
Yes, I love that. And the like in homegoing celebrations. If somebody say this one more time, let us know what we can do. We're here for you. Look, cut it out. I want to show up. Love is what love does.
Right. I like that.
Just let us know. Call us. Oh, that is just one of my pet peeves in homegoing services. And
We
so
say it
yes,
all the time. We say it all the
yes.
time.
Take
And
the
it's really
onus
because
off
it
of
makes
them.
us feel good saying something. Because
Yes,
people,
exactly.
I think the thing that I tell people, you don't have to say anything. Sometimes it's just you sitting with the person. You don't have to say nothing. And I feel better with the person saying, I don't really know what to say. I'm just here.
Right,
I don't know what to say. I feel sad too. I'm just here.
right,
Don't say nothing. Just call. Hey, just checking in. You ain't gotta, just want to hear your voice. Just want to let you know I love you. Just want to let you know I was thinking about you. Those are the things that matter. But by all means, do not ask. Don't place the burden on the person. They got enough going on, and they not gonna call you because they didn't
right,
call you when everything was good.
right. Exactly. Good,
So
good advice. I love that. We'll go ahead and wrap it up, but we got to do this again. But I do want to
absolutely.
speak on right quickly. Um, bringing it, making safe spaces, spaces in which people feel comfortable and speaking, and just releasing. I do believe that that's another area of opportunity is creating spaces in which people can just release and they can just cry if they have to. They can, as you stated, whatever words that have to come out. Look, you
Hmm.
it's safe here. I'm here where you can release. And if you want to just speak to that right quickly, I really believe that as Christians, we have opportunity there to create safe spaces for people.
I would agree. I think that oftentimes we don't feel qualified, right? And
Mhm.
God uses anybody if He's laid it on your heart. But keep in mind, being a safe space means that you hold it close to the vest. It doesn't mean that you go share it with all these other persons.
Right,
And so, in order to be a safe space, you have to be trustworthy and you have to be safe, right? I'm not just coming to talk to anybody. And sometimes when we're in the midst of that, we're crying out, we're saying things, we may be doing things that are not considered to be godly. And so what the safe space is that you're covering that person. You're understanding that they're walking in grief, that they may say some things, that they might do some stuff, and you like, what, Sister Brenda? She out in the streets. She was, you know. But there's no judgment. There's
right.
that new saying that's going around now. We listen and we don't judge. And that's really what a safe space is.
No
We
judgment.
listen and we don't judge. And
Mhm.
we create the environment and we treat people the way that we wish somebody would have treated us when we were in that space, right? Or you become the answer to the person that you wish somebody would have been the answer for you, right? So what I do now is, like I said, I have a grief group of women and men, and we get together a couple of times out of the month, and we do dinner, we do Bible
That's your church,
studies, we
right?
do big.
That's at your church.
It is within my church, but it's also
Love
we
it. I
meet
love that.
outside of my church,
I love that.
And it started kind of outside of the church, and then now that I'm planted in a church, it's carried on. Because I here was my truth. I didn't want to be the person that everybody called. I didn't want it to be attached to being a widow. It's
Mm,
like that's something that's dead. Who wants to be known as the widow? Oh, somebody died, call Lenora. And my mom and
mm.
my family members be like, oh, you need to call somebody because their husband died. Why? Like, I am
Right.
not the expert. I do not want to be the expert. But it took me some time to kind of walk in acceptance into that.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that I am a
Oh,
widow, and that was a portion that happened in my life, but that is not who I identify as. It's just something that happened to me. But I
right.
am very much living my life. I'm very
Come
much
on.
walking in the blessings of God. I'm
Yes.
very much still alive and well and healthy, right?
Yes.
And I'm an example of what you can be if you trust God, even in the worst of situations. Life is still good, and God still has a good plan for you.
I
So
love it. Amazing. We got to do this again.
we
It's
will.
been incredible. I thank God how everything has come together, even though we had some
Oh my
challenges in the
goodness. See,
beginning.
I knew it. We knew. We said it. We was like,
But
all these technical, we couldn't hear, and
right.
all this background. I was like, it's something that somebody needed to hear. So I am
Yes.
hopeful that somebody heard something, that I said something that could just bring somebody some sense of hope, some sense of joy,
Yes.
to know that you can get on the other side of this, and that
Yes.
God will supply all of your needs. He's gonna send you with the right friends. Again, my best friend, she was an encouragement to me. Sherelle, we went to high school together.
Yes.
And a couple of years before, when my husband died, she would call me every day, and she was sending books and encourage me. Well, then 2, 3 years later, her husband passed away, right?
Wow.
Unbeknownst to me, that we would, that my journey would now be
Wow.
impact her journey, right? And so we were
Mm.
already friends, but it bonded us even stronger, because who knows? She was just
Right.
being an example and being a good friend to me, not knowing that only a few years later I would have to be that for her, and so many other people. So again, our job is, we got to heal, so that we don't know who's coming behind us, right? And
Yeah.
so just make sure that you have a good group of folk, that you
Yeah.
stay, even when you feel like you done with God. No, he is not done with you, and you're gonna circle back, because you need him. You're not gonna be able to get through this life without him. You can
Yeah.
try, because I certainly did, but I promise you, I was running back like, Lord, I'm sorry. Forgive me, Jesus. I need you, Lord.
Wow, I love it. You have been amazing tonight.
Thank you.
Again, we have to do this again. I am looking forward to just taking this to the next level, because there's so much in this that we can capitalize on and help people through. We've had our journeys, we've experienced it, and just want to be there for other people and keep the love going, strengthening
Right.
others so that they can continue to strengthen those that come in their path, as you did. As the Bible states, that iron sharpens iron. And in order for the iron to get sharp, it has to go through the fire. And I just thank God that I have people like you in my life. I thank God for those that I'm connected with that are strong in the faith, strong in their things that you do, that we build one another up by our expertise and by our wisdom and knowledge. And so I thank God for you.
Same. Thank you, ma'am. Listen, virtual hug, virtual hug. When
Girl,
I come to
yes.
Detroit to visit, I'm coming to the church. I'm coming.
Girl, you gotta be here. Our women's conference that we'll have in September. I gotta bring you here because you're just an amazing gift to the body of Christ. And it's so special to me that we were together in high school. Oh
Right,
my God.
right, right.
Every time I think about this, this is so amazing. Every time I picture you back in school, you still look the same. You haven't changed. Just you were always a sweet, vibrant, just joyful, exuberant, loving person, even in high school. So I just thank God to still be connected after all these years.
I
God is good.
know. Thank you. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, I hope that there was something that I shared that, encouraged somebody else, to let people know you can make it. Just keep going forward. Keep going forward. And God has an expected end for you, and it is good. So,
Yes. What's my next, God? Come on.
Right.
For the
Absolutely.
kids. Yes. We speak over the lives. We see all the comments. I thank y'all so much stating this was great session. Glory to God. Just so excited about what we talked about. I just thank you all for your comments. We speak over your life tonight that you will not be defeated in your walk, that you will not to be destroyed, that no weapon formed against you will prosper, that you will come out on the other side strong, that you will have the resources that you need, the people that you need in your life, that you will not fail, that you will be upheld, and your next will be the big. In Jesus' name, we speak that over your life. Reach out to us if you need anything. We're here for you. Looking forward to seeing everybody tomorrow. Sunday is Harvest Sunday. Do not miss. Bring someone to church. It's going to be amazing. Giving out bikes, housewares,
Oh,
clothing,
nice.
toys. It's going to be a phenomenal Sunday, and just need everyone to be a part and connected for this weekend services. So God bless you all. Thank you, Miss Lenora Holmes. You are
Thank you, Miss
amazing,
Brenda, Pastor
phenomenal.
Brenda, Sister Brenda, all of that.
Yes, yes. Thank God for you, and looking forward to greater things, and looking forward to doing this even the more in the future, blessing people, helping people, and being there for them. Amazing. Yes.
Good. Thank you so much. Thank
God bless
y'all.
you. We love y'all. See y'all soon.
See
More
you
to
later.
come, great things to come. And we
All
bless
right.
you and
Take
thank
care.
you.
Bye.